The moment the CEO laughed, the entire room followed, and in that echo of arrogance, a quiet man in a driver's uniform lowered his eyes, holding on to a dignity no one there could see. Outside the glass walls of the towering corporate headquarters, the city pulsed with ambition. Inside, power dressed in tailored suits and polished shoes made decisions that moved billions. And standing unnoticed at the edge of that world was a man who had spent his life being invisible, until the day everything changed. Before we begin, if you believe that kindness matters and that everyone deserves a second chance, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Armin had spent the last 12 years driving a black sedan through the crowded streets of the city. To most, he was just the driver, a quiet, middle-aged man with neatly combed hair, worn hands, and a soft voice. But to his daughter, he was everything. Aliyah was 16, bright-eyed and determined, with dreams far bigger than the small apartment they called home. Every morning, Armin would drop her off at her elite private school, a place he could barely afford, but refused to take her out of. He believed education was her escape, the one chance she had to build a life where she would never be looked down upon. He never spoke much about his past. Not to his employers, not to neighbors, not even fully to Aliyah. All she knew was that her father spoke differently sometimes, slipping into languages she couldn't always recognize. It fascinated her, but he always brushed it off with a smile, saying it was nothing important. That morning felt different from the start. Armin had been assigned to drive Mr. Khanna, the CEO of a massive multinational firm, to a high-stakes meeting. Rumors had been circulating among the staff for weeks about a $1.2 billion international deal that could redefine the company's future. As Armin opened the car door for Mr. Khanna, he caught a glimpse of the man's sharp expression, focused, tense, and slightly irritated. The pressure of the deal was already weighing heavily. The drive was silent, except for the hum of the engine and distant city noise. Armin's eyes stayed on the road, his posture straight, his presence calm. He had learned long ago that silence was often safer. When they arrived at the headquarters, Armin parked the car and stepped out, opening the door once again. Mr. Khanna barely acknowledged him as he walked inside, already immersed in thoughts of contracts and negotiations. Inside the conference room, executives from multiple countries had gathered. Representatives spoke in English, but subtle accents hinted at the diversity in the room. Translators were present, but something felt off. Communication lagged. Misunderstandings crept in between words. Tension began to rise. Armin stood near the entrance, waiting quietly in case he was needed again. He had no reason to be in the room, yet something made him stay. As the meeting progressed, a representative from Eastern Europe spoke rapidly, clearly frustrated. The translator struggled, missing nuances, misrepresenting key phrases. Another delegate responded sharply in Mandarin, equally dissatisfied. The room began to fracture, not with loud arguments, but with the quiet breakdown of understanding. That's when Mr. Khanna glanced toward the door and noticed Armin still standing there. With a smirk, he made a dismissive comment, pointing subtly toward him. The room chuckled lightly. The message was clear, this was a place for decision-makers, not drivers. Armin lowered his gaze again, absorbing the moment in silence. But then something unexpected happened. One of the delegates made a statement in Russian that the translator clearly misunderstood. The room reacted based on that flawed translation, and tension spiked instantly. Voices grew sharper. The deal teetered on the edge of collapse. Armin looked up. For a brief moment, hesitation crossed his face. Years of being ignored had taught him to stay out of situations like this. But something deeper pushed him forward, something stronger than fear. He stepped slightly closer, his voice calm but firm as he addressed the misunderstanding. He spoke in fluent Russian. The room froze. Every head turned toward him. Without raising his voice, he clarified the statement precisely, capturing not just the words but the tone, the intent behind them. The Russian delegate's expression softened instantly, nodding in agreement. Before anyone could react, Armin continued, shifting seamlessly into Mandarin, responding to the previous comment with equal precision. Then into German, then Arabic, then French. The room fell into complete silence. What had moments ago been chaos was now clarity. Armin didn't rush. He translated not just language, but meaning. Cultural context. Subtle implications that no hired translator had captured. 9 languages flowed from him effortlessly, each one spoken with the ease of someone who had lived them, not just learned them. Mr. Khanna stared at him, his earlier smirk gone, replaced by disbelief. The man he had dismissed minutes ago was now holding the entire deal together. As Armin finished clarifying a final point, the room slowly came back to life, but this time, the tension had shifted. Conversations resumed, but now they were smooth, aligned, productive. The deal, which had been seconds away from collapse, was back on track. And it was because of him. Armin stepped back quietly, returning to his place near the door as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. The meeting concluded hours later with signatures, handshakes, and visible relief. The $1.2 billion deal was secured. As people began to leave, many glanced toward Armin, this time not with dismissal, but with curiosity, even respect. Mr. Khanna approached him slowly. For the first time that day, he truly looked at him, not as a driver, but as a man. There was something in his expression now that hadn't been there before. Not just surprise, but realization. Armin remained calm, his posture unchanged, his humility intact. He did not seek recognition. He never had. But for Mr. Khanna, something inside had shifted irreversibly. Later that evening, as Armin drove home through the fading light, his mind returned to Aliyah. He thought about her dreams, her future, and the life he had been quietly building for her. When he arrived, she greeted him at the door with her usual energy, asking about his day. For a moment, he paused. Then he smiled. He didn't tell her everything. Not yet. But something in his eyes told her that something important had happened. Days passed, and the story spread quietly within the company. Executives spoke about the driver who saved the deal. Some exaggerated, some doubted, but those who had been in that room knew the truth. Mr. Khanna couldn't stop thinking about it. About the man he had underestimated. About the laughter. About the moment everything changed. He began to dig into Armin's background, and what he discovered only deepened his respect. Armin had once been a professor of linguistics. A man who had dedicated his life to studying languages, cultures, and communication. But life had not been kind. Personal loss, financial hardship, and circumstances beyond his control had pushed him into a different path. Yet he had never lost who he was. He had simply hidden it. One evening, Mr. Khanna called Armin into his office. This time, there was no smirk. No laughter. Only sincerity. What happened in that room wasn't just impressive, it was transformative. It forced him to confront his own assumptions, his own arrogance. Armin listened quietly. As always. But this time, the silence carried a different weight. Respect had replaced dismissal. Opportunity had replaced limitation. And slowly, things began to change. Aliyah noticed it first. Her father seemed lighter somehow. More present. More hopeful. And one day, he finally told her. Not just about the meeting, but about his past. About who he truly was. She listened with wide eyes, tears forming as she realized the depth of the man who had raised her. The sacrifices. The strength. The quiet resilience. In that moment, she didn't just see her father. She saw a hero. If this story has touched your heart so far, take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that true worth isn't always visible at first glance. And before we reach the end, I have a special request. Comment below where you're watching from and share one word that describes how this story made you feel. Because stories like this aren't just about one man. They're about all of us. About the times we've been underestimated. About the moments we've stayed silent when we had so much to say. And about the power of finally being seen. Armin never wanted recognition. But what he did want was simple. A better life for his daughter. A chance for her to walk into any room and be valued, not judged. And now, for the first time, that future felt within reach. Because sometimes, the world doesn't change with noise or power. Sometimes, it changes in a quiet moment, when the right voice finally speaks, and everyone listens. And that's exactly what happened the day a driver spoke, and saved more than just a deal.